The smell of his cologne still makes my stomach turn. Even now, 30 years later, when I catch that same scent in a crowded elevator or walking past a department store, my hands start shaking. My name is Savannah Reed, and I'm 52 years old. For most of my life, I carried a secret that nearly destroyed me. But today, I'm finally ready to tell you what happened and how I found my way out of the darkness. If you love your parents, don't forget to share something special about them in the comments and subscribe for more amazing videos. It was the summer I turned 14 when Uncle Connor first showed me what fear really felt like. He wasn't really my uncle. He was my mother's younger brother's best friend, who we'd always called Uncle Connor. He'd been around since I was little, bringing presents on my birthday, helping fix things around our house when Dad was working late shifts at the factory. Mom always said Connor was like family, the brother she never had. That July evening, the air was thick and heavy, the kind of heat that makes your clothes stick to your skin. Mom had gone to her book club meeting, and Dad was pulling a double shift again. Connor had stopped by to drop off some tools he'd borrowed, but instead of leaving like he usually did, he lingered. I was in the living room, stretched out on the carpet doing a jigsaw puzzle I'd been working on for weeks. "Savannah," he said, his voice different somehow, softer but with an edge that made me look up. "Come here for a minute." I remember the exact moment everything changed. The way the evening light was filtering through our thin curtains, casting long shadows across the room. The sound of Mrs. Peterson's dog barking next door. The feeling of the rough carpet under my knees as I pushed myself up to walk over to him. He was sitting on our old brown couch, the one with the worn armrests that Mom kept threatening to replace. When I got close enough, he grabbed my wrist. Not hard at first, just firm enough that I couldn't pull away. "You're getting to be such a pretty girl," he said, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before, something that made my chest feel tight. "Just like your mother when she was young." I tried to step back, but his grip tightened. "Uncle Connor, you're hurting me." "Am I?" He smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile I remembered from Christmas mornings and birthday parties. This smile was cold, calculating. "I don't think I am, sweetheart. I think you're just being dramatic." He pulled me closer, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath, mixing with that cologne that would haunt me for decades. His other hand reached out and touched my face, his thumb tracing along my cheek in a way that made my skin crawl. "Your parents trust me completely," he whispered, his face so close to mine I could feel his breath on my ear. "They leave you alone with me all the time. Do you know why that is, Savannah?" I shook my head, too scared to speak. "Because they know I would never hurt their precious little girl. They know I love this family more than anything." His fingers moved from my cheek to my neck, and I felt my whole body go rigid. But love comes in different forms, doesn't it? And sometimes, love requires keeping secrets. I wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to do anything but stand there frozen while his hands explored places they had no right to touch. But I was 14, and he was 35, and the weight of his words pressed down on me like a physical thing. "If you ever told anyone about our special time together," he continued, his voice so calm it was terrifying, "who do you think they'd believe? The man who's been like family for 15 years, or a teenage girl with an overactive imagination?" He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "And even if someone did believe you, think about what it would do to your mother. Finding out that the man she trusted, the man she considered a brother, had been here all along, just waiting. It would destroy her, Savannah. It would destroy this whole family." The worst part wasn't even what he did to me that night. The worst part was how normal he acted afterward, how he ruffled my hair and told me to finish my puzzle, how he called out, "See you later, kiddo." When he left, how he waved at Mrs. Peterson when she came out to water her roses. When Mom came home an hour later, humming some song from her book club discussion, I was back on the floor with my puzzle. But my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't fit the pieces together anymore. "How was your evening, honey?" she asked, kicking off her shoes and dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. Fine, I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Was Uncle Connor here long? I saw his truck in the driveway when I got home. Not long, he just dropped off Dad's tools. She nodded, already moving on to other things, asking if I'd finished my summer reading, reminding me about my dentist appointment next week. Normal mom things, safe mom things, things that belonged to the world I lived in before that evening, when Uncle Connor was just Uncle Connor, and I was just a kid doing puzzles on the living room floor. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every word, every touch. I kept thinking about what he'd said about who people would believe. I thought about Mom's face when she talked about Connor, how she always said he was the most dependable person she knew. I thought about all the times he'd helped us, all the family barbecues where he'd flip burgers and make everyone laugh, all the Christmas mornings where he'd show up with presents wrapped in perfect bows. 3 days later, he came back. Mom was at work this time, her shift at the diner keeping her busy until late afternoon. Dad was still pulling doubles, trying to save up for the new roof we needed before winter, and I was alone in the house when I heard Connor's truck pull into our driveway. My heart started pounding so hard, I thought it might burst right out of my chest. I ran to the front door and turned the deadbolt, but before I could get to the back door, I heard his key in the lock. Of course he had a key. He'd always had a key. For emergencies, Mom said. For times when we needed help and they weren't around. Savannah. His voice carried through the house, casual and friendly, like nothing had happened. You home, sweetheart? Your mom asked me to check on you. I pressed myself against the wall in the hallway, trying to make myself invisible, trying to think of somewhere to hide. But our house was small, and there weren't many places a 14-year-old girl could disappear. There you are, he said when he found me. Why are you hiding? Did I scare you? He was wearing the same cologne, the same friendly smile, the same voice that had whispered threats in my ear just 3 days earlier. I started, but the words died in my throat. Just what? He stepped closer, and I could see that look in his eyes again. That calculating look that made my skin feel like it was crawling with insects. Just thinking about our conversation the other day. I nodded, too terrified to lie. Good girl. I knew you were smart. I knew you understood how important it is to keep family secrets safe. He reached out and touched my shoulder, and I flinched so hard I hit the back of my head against the wall. But I think we need to make sure you really understand, don't you think? What happened over the next hour still visits me in nightmares. Not just what he did, but how he did it. How he made it seem almost normal, almost like a game. How he kept talking the entire time, explaining why this was necessary, why this was actually a form of love, why I was special and mature and different from other girls my age. And when it was over, when I was curled up on my bedroom floor, feeling like my whole world had been turned inside out, he sat on the edge of my bed and talked to me like a father giving advice to his daughter. This is going to be our secret, Savannah. Just like I told you before. And you know why it has to be a secret, right? I managed to nod. Tell me why. Because my voice was barely a whisper. Because it would hurt Mom. And because no one would believe me. That's right. But there's another reason, too. He leaned down closer, his voice dropping to that terrible whisper again. Because if you ever did tell someone, if you ever tried to ruin what we have, I would have to hurt the people you love. Not you, Savannah. I would never hurt you. But your parents, well, accidents happen all the time, don't they? House fires, car crashes, people slip and fall downstairs. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understood. God help me. I understood perfectly. Good girl. Now, your mom is going to be home in about an hour, and your dad will be home for dinner. I want you to take a shower. Put on that pretty blue dress you wore to church last Sunday and be downstairs helping with dinner when they get here. Can you do that for me?" I nodded again. "And Savannah, if anyone asks how your day was, what are you going to say?" "That it was fine, that nothing happened." "That's my smart girl." He kissed the top of my head like he'd done 100 times before at family gatherings, and then he was gone. I heard his truck start up and pull out of the driveway, heard him honk twice the way he always did when he left our house. I stayed on my bedroom floor for a long time after that, staring at the pattern in the carpet, trying to make sense of what my life had become. Trying to figure out how the man who taught me to ride a bike and took me for ice cream on my 10th birthday had turned into this monster who spoke of love and family while destroying everything those words meant. But eventually, I got up. I took a shower, though no amount of soap could make me feel clean. I put on the blue dress, though my hands shook so badly I could barely manage the buttons. And when Mom came home, tired and smiling, asking about my day, I looked her right in the eye and told her it had been fine. Because what choice did I have? I was 14 years old and Uncle Connor had just shown me exactly how powerless I really was. The weeks that followed blurred together like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Connor didn't come every day, but he came often enough that I lived in constant fear. Sometimes it would be 3 days between visits, sometimes a week, but never long enough for me to feel safe. Never long enough for me to convince myself it had all been a terrible dream. He had a pattern, I started to notice. He would always come when Mom was at work and Dad was on a double shift. He knew their schedules better than I did, had probably been studying them for longer than I wanted to think about. The realization that this might have been planned for months, maybe even years, made me feel sick in a way I couldn't describe. But what made it worse was how normal everything else remained. Connor still came to family barbecues, still brought birthday presents, still helped Dad fix the broken fence in our backyard. He would ruffle my hair and call me kiddo in front of my parents, and I would have to smile and pretend everything was fine while my skin crawled at his touch. "You're getting so grown up, Savannah," he said one Saturday afternoon while the whole family was gathered for my cousin's graduation party. We were all in the backyard, the smell of hamburgers on the grill mixing with the sound of laughter and conversation. "Pretty soon you'll be in high school dating boys, breaking hearts." Mom laughed from her lawn chair, a beer in her hand and genuine happiness on her face. "Don't remind me. I'm not ready for that phase yet." "Well, when that time comes," Connor said, his hand resting on my shoulder in what anyone watching would think was an uncle's protective gesture. "She's got me to screen all the boys first. Right, Savannah." The pressure of his fingers through my t-shirt was just hard enough to remind me of his strength, just firm enough to make his message clear. I forced myself to nod and smile, though I could feel sweat beading on my forehead despite the evening breeze. "That's right," I managed to say. "Uncle Connor always looks out for me." Dad raised his beer in a mock toast. "Here's to Connor, the best fake uncle a girl could have." "Fake?" Connor laughed, but I caught something sharp in his eyes. "I prefer to think of myself as chosen family. Sometimes that's even stronger than blood, don't you think?" Later that night, after everyone had gone home and my parents were cleaning up in the kitchen, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The girl looking back at me had my face, my brown hair, my green eyes, but she was a stranger. She was someone who smiled and laughed and pretended that her world hadn't been shattered into a million pieces. I started keeping a journal hidden under my mattress, writing down everything that happened, every word Connor said, every threat he made. I told myself I was documenting it for someday, for when I was brave enough or old enough or smart enough to figure out what to do with the information. But really, I think I just needed somewhere to put all the poison he was filling me with, somewhere to store the pain so it wouldn't eat me alive from the inside. One entry, written in my shaky 14-year-old handwriting, said, "He came again today. Mom was at her shift, Dad working late like always. He brought me candy afterward, the kind with caramel I used to love. Now I can't even look at Caramel without wanting to throw up. He said I was getting better at keeping our secret, that he was proud of how mature I was becoming. I wanted to tell him that mature people don't have to keep secrets like this, but I was too scared. He reminded me again about accidents that happen to people who can't keep their mouths shut. I think about Mom's car with the bad brakes and Dad walking home from work in the dark, and I know I'll never tell. The worst part was how Connor started treating me differently in front of other people, not in an obvious way that would raise suspicions, but in small ways that made me feel like he was marking his territory. At family gatherings, he would save me a seat next to him. When we were all watching TV, he would pat his lap for me to sit there, and if I hesitated, he would give me that look that made my blood freeze. "Don't be shy, sweetheart," he would say with that charming smile that fooled everyone else. "You're not too old to sit with your Uncle Connor." And I would have to do it, would have to pretend I wanted to be there while his hand rested possessively on my back or played with my hair. My parents thought it was sweet how close we were, how much he cared about me. "You're so lucky to have Connor in your life," Mom told me one evening while we were doing dishes together. "Not every girl has a man like that looking out for her, someone who isn't her father but loves her just as much." I dropped the plate I was drying, and it shattered on the kitchen floor. The sound was so loud and sudden that we both jumped. "Oh, honey, are you okay?" Mom rushed over with the broom, worried that I'd cut myself on the pieces. "I'm fine," I said quickly, though my hands were shaking as I helped pick up the larger fragments. "Just clumsy." "You've been so jumpy lately," she observed, sweeping up the smaller pieces. "Are you feeling all right? Not getting sick, are you?" For just a moment, I considered telling her everything. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue, begging to be spoken. But then I remembered Connor's threats, remembered his calm voice describing all the accidents that could happen to people I loved, and the moment passed. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired, I guess." She studied my face for a few seconds longer, and I was terrified she could see the truth written there. But then she smiled and kissed my forehead. "Well, make sure you're getting enough sleep. You're at an age where your body needs extra rest." If only she knew how little I'd been sleeping, how I lay awake every night listening for the sound of Connor's truck in our driveway, jumping at every creak the house made as it settled. School started again in September, and I thought maybe that would give me some relief. Surely Connor wouldn't risk coming around when I might have friends over or when my schedule was more unpredictable. But I was wrong. The first time he showed up after school, I was in my room doing homework when I heard his key in the front door. My stomach dropped to my feet, and I actually considered climbing out my bedroom window and running. But where would I go? And what would I tell my parents when they found out I'd disappeared? "Savannah?" His voice carried up the stairs, friendly and casual. "I brought you something." I found him in the kitchen, a bag from the local bookstore on the counter. Inside were 3 new books, the kind of fantasy novels I'd loved before everything changed, before reading became impossible because I couldn't concentrate on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. "I remembered you mentioning these authors," he said, watching my face carefully. "Thought you might like some new books for the school year." It was such a normal, thoughtful gift, the kind of present that any caring adult might give to a teenager they cared about. And that's what made it so horrible, because I knew what the price would be. "Thank you," I whispered, because I had to say something. "Don't I get a hug for being such a thoughtful uncle?" I hugged him, because I had no choice, and felt him hold me just a little too long, a little too tight. His hands moved over my back in a way that had nothing to do with affection and everything to do with ownership. "You know," he said softly, his mouth close to my ear, "I've been thinking about our relationship lately, about how special it is, how much we mean to each other." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "I think it's time we took things to the next level, don't you? You're 15 now, practically a woman, and the way you respond to me, I can tell you're ready for more." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Uncle Connor, I can't. Shh, he whispered, and I could feel his smile against my hair. Don't overthink it, sweetheart. Trust me to know what's best for you. I've been taking care of you for so long now, haven't I? Making sure you're safe? Making sure our family stays happy and together? He pulled back to look at me, his hand still gripping my shoulders. Besides, it's not like we have a choice anymore, is it? We've already crossed so many lines together. What's a few more? That night, after he left, I sat on my bedroom floor with one of the books he'd given me and tried to read. But the words kept swimming on the page, and all I could think about was what he'd said about taking things to the next level. I knew what he meant, and the thought made me so sick I had to run to the bathroom. I started looking up emancipation laws on the school computer, researching what it would take for a 15-year-old to legally get away from her family. But every website I found said the same thing. You needed proof of abuse or neglect. You needed money for court fees and a place to live. You needed an adult to help you navigate the system. I had none of those things. I also started paying more attention to Connor's relationships with other people, wondering if I was the only one. I watched him at family gatherings, studied the way he interacted with my younger female cousins, looked for any sign that his sickness extended beyond me. What I found was almost worse than discovering other victims would have been. Connor was charming, helpful, and completely appropriate with everyone else. He was the perfect fake uncle, the reliable family friend, the man everyone trusted without question. It was like he'd saved all his darkness just for me, like I was the only one who got to see the monster behind the mask. That realization made me feel even more isolated, even more trapped. If this was something he only did to me, then maybe it really was my fault somehow. Maybe there was something wrong with me, something that made him think I deserved this. I started having panic attacks at school. The first one happened during math class when Mr. Henderson was explaining algebra problems at the board. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but sit there feeling like I was dying. The school nurse called my mom, who left work early to pick me up. "Honey, what's wrong?" she asked in the car, her face creased with worry. "The nurse said you had some kind of episode." "I don't know," I said, which was partially true. I knew what had triggered it, but I couldn't explain the trigger without explaining everything else. I just couldn't breathe all of a sudden. "Maybe we should take you to see Dr. Martinez," she suggested. "Make sure everything's okay." The thought of seeing our family doctor, of having to explain my symptoms to someone who'd known me since I was little, filled me with fresh panic. What if he asked the right questions? What if he could somehow tell what was happening to me just by looking at me? "I'm fine now," I said quickly. "I think I just got overwhelmed. School's been stressful." Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you, if someone's giving you trouble at school." Again, the words were right there. The truth was so close to spilling out that I had to bite my tongue to keep it inside. But Connor's threats echoed in my head, and I couldn't risk my parents' safety for my own freedom. "I know, Mom. Really, I'm okay." But I wasn't okay, and we both knew it. Over the next few weeks, the panic attacks became more frequent. I would be sitting in class or eating lunch or walking down the hallway, and suddenly the world would start spinning, and I couldn't catch my breath. My grades started slipping because I couldn't concentrate on anything. Connor, of course, noticed the change in me. He commented on it the next time he visited, running his fingers through my hair as I sat rigidly on the couch beside him. "You seem tense lately, sweetheart. Everything all right?" I wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him that he was the reason I couldn't sleep or eat or function like a normal human being. Instead, I just nodded. "School's been hard." His fingers moved to the back of my neck, massaging gently in a way that made my skin crawl. "You know what I think? I think you're spending too much time worrying about things that don't matter. Grades, friends, all that teenage drama. What matters is family, Savannah. What matters is the people who really care about you." His hand moved lower, tracing patterns on my back through my shirt. "And you know who cares about you more than anyone else in this world?" I knew what answer he wanted, but I couldn't make myself say it. "That's right," he continued as if I had responded. Uncle Connor, who's always been there for you, who's always protected you, who loves you in a way that no one else ever could." There was something different about him that day, something more intense than usual. He seemed agitated, almost manic, like he was building up to something big. "In fact," he said, his voice dropping to that terrible whisper I'd learned to fear, "I think it's time we made our relationship official. Don't you?" The room started spinning and I felt like I might throw up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time to stop pretending this is temporary. Time to stop acting like what we have is wrong or shameful. You're almost 16, Savannah. In some places, that's old enough to make your own decisions about love." Love. The word made me want to scrub my skin raw. "Uncle Connor, I started, but he cut me off. "I've been thinking about this for months, planning it out. Your parents trust me completely. They wouldn't think twice about me taking you on a little trip, maybe to that cabin my buddy owns up in the mountains, just the two of us, away from all the distractions and pressures of everyday life." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. A trip? A honeymoon, really. A chance for us to finally be together the way we're meant to be, without having to worry about anyone interrupting us or asking questions. His smile was pure predator now, all pretense of affection gone. "What do you think, sweetheart? Ready to become a real woman?" I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but sit there while he described his plans for me in detail. He talked about the isolated cabin, about the long weekend he'd already planned, about how my parents would never suspect anything because they trusted him so completely. "The best part," he concluded, "is that after this weekend, you'll finally understand that there's no going back. No more pretending this is something that might end someday. You'll be mine completely, and everyone will know it, even if they don't know they know it." That night, I wrote in my journal with hands that shook so badly I could barely hold the pen. He's planning something terrible, something that will change everything forever. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop him. God, somebody please help me. Please. But even as I wrote those words, I knew that God wasn't going to save me. My parents weren't going to save me. No one was coming to rescue the girl who smiled and said everything was fine while her world crumbled around her. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to find a way out of the nightmare my life had become, I was going to have to save myself. The question was how? That question consumed me for the next 2 weeks. I barely slept, barely ate, and spent every free moment trying to figure out some way to escape Connor's trap. I researched everything I could think of on the school computers when I was supposed to be working on assignments. I looked up self-defense techniques, read about witness protection programs, even researched how to disappear completely and start a new life somewhere else. But every option I found required things I didn't have: money, adult help, or proof that would convince authorities to take action. And Connor's threats about accidents happening to my parents kept echoing in my head, paralyzing me with fear every time I thought about reaching out for help. Then something happened that changed everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. I was walking home from school on a Tuesday afternoon, taking the long way because I'd seen Connor's truck in our driveway, and I wasn't ready to face whatever he had planned for me. I was cutting through the park when I heard shouting coming from behind the old baseball dugout. My first instinct was to keep walking, to mind my own business like I'd been trained to do for the past year and a half, but something about the voice made me stop. It was a girl's voice, young, scared, pleading. I crept closer, staying hidden behind the maintenance shed, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There was a man there, maybe in his 30s, with his hands on a girl who couldn't have been more than 12 or 13. She was crying, trying to push him away, but he was so much bigger than her. "Please," she was saying, "I want to go home. I want my mom." "Your mom doesn't need to know about this," the man said, and his voice was calm and reasonable, almost gentle. "This is just between us, okay? Our special secret." The words hit me like a physical blow. Our special secret. How many times had Connor said those exact words to me? I should have run. I should have gone straight to find a phone and called the police. But instead, I found myself stepping out from behind the shed, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "Hey!" I shouted. "Get away from her!" The man spun around, startled, and in that moment of distraction, the little girl broke free and ran. She didn't stop to thank me, didn't even look back, just ran toward the street as fast as her legs could carry her. Smart girl. The man looked at me with fury in his eyes, and for a second I thought he might come after me instead. But then he seemed to think better of it, probably realizing that there was too much risk of being seen or caught. He muttered something under his breath and stalked off in the opposite direction. I stood there in the empty park, shaking like a leaf, but for the first time in over a year I felt something besides fear and helplessness. I felt powerful. I had stopped something terrible from happening. I had saved someone. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the little girl. I wondered if she would tell her parents what had happened, or if she would do what I had done and keep the secret out of fear and shame. I wondered if that man would find her again, or if he would find someone else. But mostly, I thought about how different I had felt in that moment when I stepped out from behind the shed. For just a few seconds, I hadn't been Connor's victim. I had been someone who fought back. The next day at school, I did something I'd never done before. During lunch, I went to the library and looked up everything I could find about child predators and how they operated. What I learned made me sick, but it also made me angry in a way I'd never been angry before. I learned that predators almost always followed the same patterns. They targeted children who were isolated, who felt like they had no one to turn to. They used shame and fear and threats to keep their victims silent. They made their victims feel special and chosen, but also dirty and complicit. They made their victims believe that no one would believe them if they told. But I also learned something else. I learned that predators were often repeat offenders, that they rarely stopped with just one victim. And I learned that the longer they got away with it, the bolder they became. Connor was getting bolder. His threats were becoming more specific, his plans more detailed. The cabin trip he described wasn't some distant possibility anymore. He'd started mentioning specific dates, talking about it like it was definitely going to happen. "Just 3 more weeks," he'd whispered to me the last time he visited, his hands roaming places they shouldn't while I sat frozen on the couch. 3 more weeks, and then we'll have all the time in the world to explore how deep our connection really goes. 3 weeks. I had 3 weeks to figure out how to save myself. That's when I remembered something my 7th grade English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had said during a unit on research projects. She'd told us that if we ever needed help with anything, and she'd emphasized anything, we could come to her. She'd said it in a way that made it clear she wasn't just talking about homework. Mrs. Patterson was young, maybe late 20s, and she had a kind face and a no-nonsense way of dealing with problems. She was also the faculty advisor for the school's peer counseling program, which meant she probably knew about resources for kids in trouble. For 3 days, I worked up the courage to approach her. I would walk by her classroom during lunch or linger after English class, but I could never quite make myself say the words. What if she didn't believe me? What if she felt obligated to tell my parents? What if Connor found out and made good on his threats? But on Friday afternoon, when I was walking past her classroom for the 12th time, she called out to me, "Savannah, do you have a minute? I wanted to talk to you about your latest essay." My heart started pounding, but I nodded and followed her into the classroom. She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit down. "Your essay about family relationships," she said, settling into the chair across from me. It was very intense. very emotional. I'd written about the complexity of family loyalty, about how sometimes the people closest to us could hurt us the most, about the impossible choices we faced when love and fear got tangled up together. I'd thought I was being subtle, but apparently not subtle enough. "I'm okay," I said automatically, the lie coming as easily as breathing after months of practice. Mrs. Patterson studied my face for a long moment. "Savannah, I've been teaching for 6 years now, and I've learned to recognize when a student is struggling with something serious. Your grades have dropped, you've been having what the nurse tells me are panic attacks, and your writing has the tone of someone who's carrying a very heavy burden." I could feel tears starting to build behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. "I'm just stressed about school." "Is that all?" Her voice was gentle but persistent. Because if someone in your life, anyone in your life, is making you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, there are people who can help. There are ways to make it stop. The words hung in the air between us, and I realized this was it. This was my chance to tell someone, to get help, to make Connor's nightmare end. But even as I opened my mouth to speak, his voice echoed in my head. "Accidents happen all the time. House fires, car crashes, people slip and fall downstairs." "I'm fine," I whispered, hating myself for the lie but too terrified to tell the truth. Mrs. Patterson looked disappointed but not surprised. "Okay, but Savannah, if you ever change your mind, if you ever need someone to talk to or somewhere safe to go, I want you to know that my door is always open. And there are other resources too. The guidance counselor, the school social worker, even anonymous hotlines you can call." She pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down several phone numbers. "These are all confidential," she said, handing it to me. "No one has to know you called unless you want them to know." I took the paper with shaking hands, folded it carefully, and put it in my backpack. "Thank you. And Savannah, whatever's happening, whatever situation you might be in, it's not your fault. Do you understand me? It's not your fault, and you deserve to be safe and happy." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and practically ran out of the classroom. But that piece of paper felt like it was burning a hole in my backpack for the rest of the day. That weekend, Connor came by while my parents were out grocery shopping. He was more aggressive than usual, more possessive, and he kept talking about the cabin trip like it was already decided. "I've got everything planned out," he said, his hands gripping my wrists hard enough to leave bruises. "Your parents think you're going to spend the weekend with your cousin Jessica in the next town over. I already talked to your mom about it, told her how excited Jessica was to have you visit." My stomach dropped. Jessica was Connor's niece, his actual niece, and she lived about 2 hours away. If my parents thought I was there, they wouldn't worry when they couldn't reach me. They wouldn't start looking for me until it was too late. "I've been thinking about this moment for so long," he continued, his voice taking on that dreamy quality that always made my skin crawl. "Finally having you all to myself, with no interruptions, no time limits, we can really explore what we mean to each other." He pushed me back against the wall, his body trapping me there, and I could smell that cologne that still haunted my nightmares. "You're going to love it, Savannah. I'm going to show you things you've never imagined, make you feel things you've never felt before. By the time we come back, you'll understand that this is how it was always supposed to be." "Please," I whispered, though I knew it was useless. "I don't want to go." "Of course you do," he said, his smile sharp and dangerous. "You just don't know it yet. But you will. Oh, sweetheart, you will." After he left, I sat on my bedroom floor and pulled out the piece of paper Mrs. Patterson had given me. The phone numbers seemed to blur together as tears I'd been holding back for months finally started to fall. I thought about the little girl in the park, about how scared she'd looked, about how I'd felt when I stepped out from behind that shed and found my voice. I thought about all the things I'd learned about predators, about how they never stopped unless someone made them stop. And I thought about Mrs. Patterson's words. "It's not your fault, and you deserve to be safe and happy." Maybe she was right. Maybe I did deserve better than this. Maybe I deserved to be more than Connor's victim. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number on the list before I could lose my nerve. National Child Abuse Hotline, a woman's voice said. This is Sarah. How can I help you? For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words I'd kept locked inside for so long seemed too big, too terrible to say out loud. Hello? Sarah said gently. Are you there? It's okay, take your time. I dot. My voice cracked, and I had to start over. I think I need help. Okay, Sarah said, her voice warm and patient. I'm here to listen. What's going on? And for the first time in almost 2 years, I started to tell the truth. I told her about Connor, about the threats, about the cabin trip he was planning. I told her about my parents and how much they trusted him, about how I was afraid no one would believe me. I told her about the panic attacks and the sleepless nights, and the way I'd started to believe that maybe I deserved what was happening to me. Sarah listened without judgment, asking gentle questions to clarify details but never making me feel like I was being interrogated. She told me that what Connor was doing was called grooming, that the threats he'd made were designed to keep me isolated and silent, that none of it was my fault. The most important thing, she said, is that you're reaching out now. That takes incredible courage, and it means we can help you. She explained my options. I could report Connor to the police. I could tell a trusted adult who could help me report it, or I could work with the hotline to develop a safety plan while I decided what to do next. What happens if I report it? I asked. Well, that depends on a lot of factors, Sarah said honestly. The police would investigate, which might include interviewing you, your parents, and Connor. If they find enough evidence, they would arrest him and he'd go through the court system. But what if they don't believe me? What if there's not enough evidence? That's a valid concern, Sarah acknowledged. But Savannah, predators like Connor rarely have just one victim. Often, when one person comes forward, it gives other victims the courage to speak up, too. Your testimony might be the key that stops him from hurting other children. Other children. The thought hadn't really occurred to me before. But of course, Connor wasn't going to stop with me. There would be other girls, other families he'd infiltrate with his charm and trustworthiness, other children who would go through what I'd been going through. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course you do. This is a huge decision, and you shouldn't feel pressured to make it right now. Sarah gave me her direct number and told me I could call back any time, day or night. But Savannah? If you're in immediate danger, if he tries to take you on that trip, you call 911 immediately. Don't worry about protecting anyone else's feelings or keeping his secrets. Your safety is the only thing that matters. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost 2 years: hope. It was fragile and small, but it was there. For the first time, I had a plan that didn't involve just enduring Connor's abuse until I was old enough to escape. But I also felt terrified because I knew that once I set this process in motion, there would be no going back. Connor would know that I'd broken my silence, and I had no idea what he might do when he found out. The cabin trip was only 10 days away now, 10 days to decide whether to trust the system to protect me or to keep playing the role of the perfect victim until I could find another way out. 10 days to choose between the hell I knew and the uncertain future I might create by telling the truth. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, weighing my options, and for the first time in months, I didn't jump at every sound the house made as it settled, because tomorrow I was going to start fighting back. The question was no longer whether I could save myself. The question was whether I was brave enough to try. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. Something had shifted during that phone call with Sarah, like a door had opened in my mind that I hadn't even realized was locked. For the first time since Connor's abuse began, I felt like I had some control over my situation. But control, I was about to learn, was more complicated than I'd imagined. I was getting ready for school when Mom knocked on my bedroom door. "Savannah, can I come in for a minute?" Sure, I called, though my heart immediately started racing. Had she somehow found out about my phone call? Could she tell something had changed? She sat on the edge of my bed, and I could see she was struggling with something. Her hands were fidgeting with the hem of her work uniform, and she had that worried crease between her eyebrows that appeared whenever she was trying to figure out how to handle a difficult situation. "Honey, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." My mouth went dry. This was it. Somehow she knew. Connor had already gotten to her, already started doing damage control before I could even figure out how to tell her the truth. "Okay," I managed. Are you okay? Really okay, I mean?" She reached out and touched my cheek gently. "You've been so different lately. Jumpy, quiet, those panic attacks at school. Your father and I are worried sick about you." The concern in her voice was so genuine, so full of love that I almost broke down right there. This was my chance to tell her everything, to let her help me figure out what to do next. But Connor's threat still echoed in my head, and I couldn't shake the image of something terrible happening to her because of my choices. "I'm okay, Mom. Just stressed about school stuff." She studied my face for a long moment, and I could see she didn't believe me. "Is someone bothering you? A boy at school, maybe? Or other kids giving you trouble?" "No, nothing like that." "Because if someone was hurting you or making you uncomfortable, you know you could tell me, right? Your father and I would do anything to protect you." The irony was crushing. She was offering me exactly what I needed, but the person I needed protection from was someone she trusted completely, someone who had been part of our family for as long as I could remember. "I know, Mom. I'm really okay." She sighed and kissed my forehead. "Well, maybe this weekend will be good for you. A change of scenery, some time away from whatever's been stressing you out." My blood turned to ice. "This weekend? Your trip to visit Jessica, remember?" Connor mentioned it again yesterday when he called to confirm the details. He's really sweet to drive you all that way. Not many men would go out of their way like that for someone else's kid. The room started spinning. Connor had already set his plan in motion, had already convinced my parents that I was supposed to go away with him this weekend. I'd thought I had 10 days to figure things out, but apparently he'd moved up his timeline. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I don't really want to go visit Jessica this weekend. Can we reschedule?" "Oh, honey, but Connor's already made all the arrangements and Jessica's been looking forward to it. It would be rude to cancel now." "Please," I said, desperation creeping into my voice despite my efforts to stay calm. I have a lot of homework, and I'm not feeling well." Mom frowned and pressed her hand to my forehead. "You don't feel warm. Are you sure you're not just nervous about the trip? I know you haven't seen Jessica in a while, but you two used to be so close." "It's not that," I said, but I couldn't explain what it really was without telling her everything. "Well, if you're really not feeling well by Friday, we'll see. But Connor's been so excited about this trip, and he's doing us such a favor. The least we can do is not cancel at the last minute unless it's absolutely necessary." After she left for work, I sat on my bed staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. Connor had outmaneuvered me again, had used my parents' trust and politeness against me. Even if I tried to get out of the trip now, it would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I needed help, and I needed it fast. At school that day, I found myself walking past Mrs. Patterson's classroom again, but this time I didn't hesitate. I knocked on her door during my lunch period. "Savannah?" she said, looking surprised but pleased. "Come in. How are you doing?" "Not great," I admitted, closing the door behind me. I think I'm ready to talk." Her expression immediately became more serious, and she gestured for me to sit down. "Okay, I'm listening." I told her everything, about Connor, about the years of abuse, about the threats he'd made against my parents. I told her about the cabin trip that was supposed to happen this weekend, about how my parents already thought they were doing Connor a favor by letting me go. Mrs. Patterson listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail I shared. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Savannah," she said finally, "what you've just told me, this is serious. This is criminal behavior, and it needs to be reported. But what if he hurts my parents? What if—" "Listen to me," she said firmly. "Men like Connor make threats like that to keep their victims silent, but they rarely follow through. They're predators, but they're also cowards. They don't want to draw attention to themselves by committing more serious crimes." She pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call Child Protective Services right now. They'll know how to handle this situation safely." "Wait," I said, panic rising in my chest. "What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm making it up?" "They'll believe you," Mrs. Patterson said with conviction. "What you've described follows a very clear pattern that professionals recognize. And Savannah, you're incredibly brave for speaking up. I know it doesn't feel that way, but what you're doing right now is the bravest thing anyone can do." She made the call while I sat there trying not to hyperventilate. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but I caught enough to understand that someone was coming to the school that afternoon to talk to me. "Her name is Detective Lisa Morgan," Mrs. Patterson explained after hanging up. "She specializes in crimes against children, and she's going to help us figure out how to keep you safe." "What about the trip this weekend?" "You're not going on any trip with Connor," she said firmly. "Not this weekend, not ever. We're going to make sure of that." Detective Morgan arrived 2 hours later. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that somehow made me feel safer immediately. "Savannah," she said after introducing herself, "I want you to know that everything you tell me is going to be kept confidential until we decide together how to proceed. My job is to keep you safe, not to make your life more complicated." She asked me to tell my story again, taking notes as I spoke, but never making me feel like I was being interrogated. When I got to the part about Connor's threats against my parents, she nodded grimly. "That's a classic intimidation tactic," she said. "It's designed to make you feel responsible for protecting everyone else. But the truth is, the best way to protect your family is to stop Connor before he escalates further. But what if he does try to hurt them? We're going to make sure he doesn't have the opportunity," Detective Morgan said. "But I need to ask you something important. Do you think Connor might have other victims? Other children he's had access to over the years?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I don't know, maybe? Think about it. Family, friends, neighbors' kids, children at family gatherings. Has he ever shown inappropriate interest in anyone else? I thought back to all the family barbecues and birthday parties, all the times Connor had been around other children. There was my cousin Emma, who was 3 years younger than me. I remembered how she used to follow Connor around when she was little, how he would pick her up and carry her around, how she would giggle and call him her favorite uncle. But then I remembered something else. Emma had stopped being so affectionate with Connor when she was around 10 or 11. She'd started avoiding him at family gatherings, making excuses to leave the room when he arrived. At the time, I'd thought she was just growing up, becoming too cool for childish affections. Now I wondered if there was another reason. "My cousin Emma," I said slowly. "She's younger than me, and she used to be really close to Connor when she was little. But then she started acting differently around him." Detective Morgan made a note. "How much younger?" 3 years. She's 13 now. Would you be comfortable if we talked to Emma in a safe, supervised environment?" The thought of Emma going through what I'd experienced made me feel sick, but it also made me angry in a way I'd never been angry before. If Connor had hurt her too, if he'd made her feel as scared and powerless as he'd made me feel, "Yes," I said firmly. "If he hurt her, she deserves to know she's not alone." Detective Morgan nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right attitude. Predators like Connor count on their victims feeling isolated and ashamed. When victims support each other, it breaks their power." She explained what would happen next. They would interview Emma separately, and if she confirmed that Connor had abused her too, they would have a much stronger case. They would also investigate Connor's background, looking for other potential victims and gathering evidence of his pattern of behavior. "What about this weekend?" I asked. "My parents are expecting me to go on that trip." "You're not going anywhere with Connor," Detective Morgan said firmly. "We'll figure out a way to handle your parents that doesn't put you at risk. But Savannah, I need you to understand something. Once we start this investigation, Connor is going to know that someone has spoken up. He might try to contact you, might try to convince you to recant your story. He might even escalate his threats." "What should I do if he does?" "You call me immediately," she said, handing me her card. "Day or night doesn't matter. And if you ever feel like you're in immediate danger, you call 911. Don't worry about protecting his reputation or keeping family peace. Your safety is the only thing that matters." After Detective Morgan left, Mrs. Patterson sat with me while I tried to process everything that had happened. My whole world was about to change, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if I've made everything worse?" "You haven't made anything worse," she said firmly. "You've made it better. It might not feel that way right now, but you've taken the first step towards stopping Connor from hurting you and potentially other children." That evening, I went home and tried to act normal while my parents talked about their day and made plans for the weekend. Every time they mentioned Connor's name, I felt a jolt of anxiety, but I also felt something else: anticipation. Soon they would know the truth about the man they'd trusted with their daughter's safety. I was in my room doing homework when my phone rang. Connor's name appeared on the screen, and my heart started pounding. "Hello?" "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice as warm and friendly as always. "Just wanted to check in about this weekend. Make sure you're all packed and ready for our little adventure." The word adventure made my skin crawl, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Actually, Connor, I'm not feeling very well. I think I might be getting sick." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, sharper. "Sick? What kind of sick?" "Just tired, and my stomach's been bothering me." Well, fresh mountain air is probably exactly what you need. I'm sure you'll feel better once we get up to the cabin." "I really don't think I should go." Another pause. Longer this time. "Savannah, is there something you're not telling me? You sound different." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it through the phone. "No, I'm just not feeling well." Because if someone has been filling your head with ideas, if someone has been asking you questions or making you think that our relationship is anything other than what it is, his voice dropped to that dangerous whisper I knew so well. That would be very disappointing and very dangerous for everyone involved. "No one's been asking me anything," I lied. "Good, because you know how important it is that we keep our special connection just between us. You know what could happen to the people you love if that ever changed." After he hung up, I sat on my bed shaking. He knew. Somehow he knew that something had changed, that I was no longer under his complete control. And if he knew, then what was he planning to do about it? I picked up Detective Morgan's card and stared at it for a long time before finally dialing her number. "Detective Morgan?" "It's Savannah. Connor just called me, and I think he suspects something." "What did he say?" I told her about the conversation, about the subtle threats, and the way his voice had changed when I tried to get out of the trip. "Okay," she said after I finished. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have a patrol car drive by your house tonight, just as a precaution. And tomorrow, we're going to accelerate our timeline. We can't wait for the weekend to handle this situation." "What does that mean?" "It means tomorrow afternoon we're going to arrest Connor Adams. And Savannah, after tomorrow, you're never going to have to be afraid of him again." As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time in almost 2 years, I actually believed that might be true. Tomorrow, the nightmare would finally begin to end. But first, I had to survive one more night of being Connor's secret victim. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that Connor wasn't going to go down without a fight. I barely slept that night. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the house settling made me wonder if Connor had decided to escalate things before the police could arrest him. But Detective Morgan had been true to her word. I saw the patrol car drive by 3 times during the night, its headlights sweeping across my bedroom window like a promise of protection. The next morning felt surreal. I got up, got dressed, ate breakfast with my parents like it was any other day. Mom reminded me to pack for my trip to Jessica's, and I nodded along while my stomach churned. Dad ruffled my hair and told me to have fun, to not give Connor too much trouble on the drive. If only they knew. At school, I could barely concentrate on anything. Every minute felt like an hour as I waited for Detective Morgan's call. During lunch, Mrs. Patterson checked on me. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Terrified, I admitted. What if something goes wrong? What if he gets away? "He won't," she said firmly. "Detective Morgan knows what she's doing. And Savannah, whatever happens today, you've already won. You found your voice. You broke the silence. That's the hardest part." At 2:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morgan. "It's done. Connor Adams is in custody. You're safe." I stared at those words for a long time, reading them over and over until they started to feel real. Connor Adams is in custody. You're safe. For the first time in almost 2 years, I took a deep breath that didn't feel like it was being squeezed out of my lungs. But my relief was short-lived. At 3:15, Mrs. Patterson came to get me out of my last class. "Your parents are here," she said quietly. Detective Morgan told them everything. Walking to the principal's office felt like the longest journey of my life. I didn't know what I would see when I opened that door. Would my parents be angry that I'd lied to them for so long? Would they blame me for not telling them sooner? Would they believe Connor's version of events over mine? When I walked in, Mom was crying. Dad was pacing by the window, his hands clenched into fists, his face red with anger. Detective Morgan was sitting calmly in a chair, a folder of documents on the table in front of her. "Savannah," Mom said as soon as she saw me, jumping up and pulling me into the tightest hug of my life. "Oh my God, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We didn't know." She was crying so hard she could barely speak, and feeling her arms around me, feeling her love and protection instead of Connor's twisted version of affection, broke something open inside me that I'd kept locked away for too long. "It's not your fault, Mom," I said, crying too now. "I wanted to tell you, but I was so scared." Dad stopped pacing and came over to us, wrapping both of us in his arms. "I'm going to kill him," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I trusted him. I let him into our house, let him near my daughter. "Mr. Reed," Detective Morgan said gently, "I understand your anger, but Connor is where he belongs now. He can't hurt Savannah anymore." "What happens next?" Dad asked. Detective Morgan explained the legal process, how Connor would be charged, how there would likely be a trial. She also told us about Emma. "We interviewed your niece this morning," she said. Connor had been abusing her for about 6 months. She was too scared to tell anyone, just like Savannah was. But when she learned that Savannah had spoken up, she found the courage to tell her parents the truth too. The thought of Emma going through what I'd experienced made me feel sick, but it also made me feel something else. Proud. Proud that my courage had helped her find hers. Proud that together, we'd stopped Connor from hurting anyone else. "There may be other victims," Detective Morgan continued. "We're investigating Connor's past, looking at other families he had access to over the years. Your testimony, both of you, could help us identify and help other children." 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom and told my story to a judge and jury. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but also the most empowering. Connor sat at the defendant's table in his orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the charming family friend who had terrorized me for so long. He looked small and pathetic and utterly powerless. Emma testified too, her voice strong and clear as she described what Connor had done to her. We held hands in the hallway afterward, two survivors who had found our strength together. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Connor guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of more time as the investigation uncovered additional victims. When the judge read the verdict, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Connor's abuse began. Free. That night, my family had dinner together, just the three of us. No fake uncles, no hidden threats, no secrets poisoning the air between us. Mom had made my favorite meal, and Dad told terrible jokes that made us all laugh until our sides hurt. "I'm proud of you," Dad said as we were cleaning up. "I know it couldn't have been easy speaking up, going through the trial, but you saved yourself, and you saved Emma, and probably other kids we'll never even know about." "I'm proud of me too," I said, and realized I meant it. Later that evening, I was in my room when my phone rang. It was Sarah from the abuse hotline, the woman who had listened to me that first terrifying night when I'd finally found the courage to break my silence. "I saw the news about the verdict," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Different," I said, trying to find the right words. "Lighter, I guess. Like I can finally breathe again." "That's exactly how you should feel," she said. "You did something incredibly brave, Savannah. You turned your pain into power, and you used that power to protect other children. That's the definition of a hero." A hero. I'd never thought of myself that way, but maybe she was right. Maybe the scared 14-year-old girl who had started this journey had grown into someone stronger, someone who could face down monsters and win. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since Connor's arrest. Today, justice was served. Today, the man who tried to destroy me learned that I am not as powerless as he thought I was. Today, I proved that silence might protect the guilty, but speaking truth protects the innocent. I am Savannah Reed. I am a survivor. I am free. And I found the way. I closed the journal and looked out my bedroom window at the quiet street, at the ordinary houses full of ordinary families living their ordinary lives. Somewhere out there, there might be another child carrying secrets too heavy for small shoulders, living in fear, believing they have no choice but to endure. But they do have a choice. We all do. Sometimes the way out of darkness isn't a dramatic rescue or a sudden revelation. Sometimes it's just finding the courage to whisper the truth to someone who cares enough to listen. Sometimes it's realizing that the people who hurt us only have as much power as we give them. And sometimes the way forward is simply refusing to let someone else's darkness become your own. I am living proof that there is always a way. You just have to be brave enough to find it.